For decades, Gajah Mada had pursued one impossible dream: to unite Nusantara under Majapahit. By the year 1357, that dream seemed closer than ever. A royal marriage with the Kingdom of Sunda promised peace, and perhaps a new chapter for the empire. Instead, it ended in blood, and on a field called Bubat, the greatest dream of Majapahit began to die. By the middle of the 14th century, Majapahit had become the greatest power the archipelago had ever known. Years of conquest, diplomacy, and sacrifice had brought Gajah Mada's lifelong dream closer than ever. Under King Hayam Wuruk, the kingdom entered an era later remembered as Majapahit's Golden Age. Its ports bustled with merchants from distant lands. Its fertile lands fed a growing population. Wealth flowed into the royal capital, while Majapahit's prestige spread across the seas. But the kingdom's strength was measured by more than its prosperity. Through diplomacy, alliances, tribute, and military campaigns, its influence continued to expand across Nusantara. Historians still debate the true extent of Majapahit's authority, yet few dispute that it had become the dominant power of its age. Standing beside Hayam Wuruk was the kingdom's legendary Mahapati, Gajah Mada. Decades earlier, he had sworn the Palapa Oath. He would not enjoy worldly pleasures until Nusantara was united. Now, for the first time, that impossible promise seemed within reach. Then came an opportunity unlike any before. Hayam Wuruk wished to marry Princess Dyah Pitaloka, the daughter of King Lingabuana of the Sunda Kingdom. To many, the marriage promised more than a royal union. It promised friendship between two great kingdoms, a future built not through conquest, but through peace. News of the royal marriage was received with great honor in the Sunda Kingdom. For King Lingabuana, the invitation marked the beginning of a historic alliance between two of the most powerful kingdoms in the archipelago. Accepting the proposal, he prepared to accompany his daughter, Princess Dyah Pitaloka, to Majapahit. This was no ordinary royal wedding. The king himself would lead the delegation. Princes, nobles, court officials, soldiers, musicians, and attendants gathered for the long voyage across the Java Sea. Alongside them came ceremonial gifts, precious textiles, gold ornaments, spices, heirlooms, and everything befitting a royal marriage. Contemporary sources describe a magnificent procession, worthy of a kingdom traveling not to war, but to celebrate peace. As the royal fleet departed the shores of Sunda, few could have imagined what awaited them in Majapahit. They believed they were sailing toward a wedding. In truth, they were sailing toward one of the greatest tragedies in Indonesian history. After days at sea, the Sunda royal fleet finally arrived in Majapahit. They were welcomed with the honors befitting a royal guest and escorted to the field of Bubat, just outside the capital. At Bubat, King Lingabuana, Princess Dyah Pitaloka, and the Sunda delegation prepared for the wedding they believed would unite two great kingdoms. Yet inside the Majapahit court, a very different interpretation was taking shape. To Gajah Mada, this was more than a royal marriage. It was the final opportunity to fulfill the Palapa Oath. In his view, Princess Dyah Pitaloka should not be presented as an equal bride, but as a tribute from Sunda to Majapahit. Such a gesture would symbolize Sunda's submission and complete Majapahit's supremacy over the archipelago. Whether Hayam Wuruk accepted this interpretation remains uncertain. The historical sources tell different versions of what happened next. But before the misunderstanding could be resolved, the seeds of tragedy had already been planted. Messengers traveled between the two camps, carrying words instead of weapons. Each side believed the other would eventually yield, but every message only widened the distance between them. King Lingabuwana refused to accept terms that would dishonor his daughter, his kingdom, and the sovereignty of the Sunda throne. Across the field, the Majapahit court stood by its position. What had begun as a royal wedding had become a test of honor neither kingdom was willing to fail. Neither side came to Bubat seeking war, yet neither side believed it could retreat without sacrificing its dignity. At Bubat, words had failed, and history was about to be written in blood. At dawn, the silence of Bubat was finally broken. Negotiations had failed. Words gave way to steel. Majapahit soldiers advanced across the Bubat field. King Lingabuwana gathered his small royal escort around him. Greatly outnumbered, King Lingabuwana and his royal guard chose to stand their ground. They had not come to Majapahit seeking conquest, yet they refused to surrender the honor of the Sunda Kingdom. The wedding delegation made its final stand. One by one, they fell defending their king, their princess, and their dignity. By the end of the battle, King Lingabuwana lay among the dead. According to the traditional accounts, Princess Dyah Pitaloka chose death rather than live in dishonor. Whether every detail unfolded exactly as later chronicles describe can no longer be known. But the tragedy of Bubat would echo far beyond that battlefield. A royal wedding meant to unite two kingdoms, instead left a wound that neither kingdom would ever truly forget. The Battle of Bubat was over, but its consequences had only just begun. The relationship between Majapahit and the Sunda Kingdom was shattered. According to later traditions, Hayam Wuruk mourned the loss of the princess he had hoped to marry. Gajah Mada's legacy became forever tied to the tragedy at Bubat. Even today, the memory of Bubat can still be felt. In many parts of West Java, streets rarely bear the name of Gajah Mada, a reflection of how deeply the tragedy remains embedded in Sundanese historical memory. Historians continue to debate parts of the story, but one truth remains beyond dispute. A failure of diplomacy turned a royal wedding into a wound remembered for centuries.